The morning sun hadn't yet burned off the fog when Captain Sarah Chen walked into the briefing room at Forward Operating Base Mercy in eastern Afghanistan. Her boots clicked against the metal floor, a sound that used to command attention. Now, nobody even looked up. Sarah was used to being invisible. She had been used to it for 12 years. At 34 years old, with 17 years of military service behind her, Sarah Chen had earned the respect of every soldier under her command. She was methodical. She was brave. She made good decisions under pressure. But what she wasn't, in the eyes of many at the base, was the right kind of soldier. Colonel Reeves sat at the front of the room, his thick jaw working on a piece of gum. He was 52, with silver threading through his dark hair and a reputation for promoting the soldiers who drank with him on Friday nights. Sarah had never been invited. "Gentlemen," he said, nodding at the 6 officers standing at attention. Sarah stood among them, but he didn't say, "and lady." He just said, "Gentlemen." She had stopped correcting people about it 3 years ago. "We've got intelligence on a cache location about 8 kilometers northeast," Reeves said, pointing at a map on the wall. "Weapons, supplies, possibly communications equipment. This is the kind of bust that looks good in reports, looks good for promotions." He smiled at Major Thompson, his favorite, a man with perfect teeth and a family connection to a 3-star general. "Thompson," Reeves continued, "I'm putting you in charge of this operation. You'll take a squad of 12, 2 Humvees and air support on standby. Hit them at dawn tomorrow." Thompson nodded eagerly. Sarah knew what he was thinking. That was exactly what she was thinking. A successful raid meant recognition. Recognition meant advancement. She needed that advancement. She had been passed over for promotion twice already, and she could feel her window closing. Sarah waited until the briefing was over, until the other officers had filed out with their congratulations and backslaps for Thompson. Then she approached Reeves at his desk. "Sir," she said quietly, "with respect, I think Captain's 3rd Platoon has better experience with precision operations in this terrain. We've trained extensively for this kind of—" "Chen," Reeves interrupted, not looking up from his paperwork, "Thompson's got it. He's got good instincts." "Yes, sir, but I've actually conducted 4 successful raids in this exact grid section. I know the local patterns, I said Thompson's got it." Sarah felt the familiar burn of frustration in her chest. She had learned to recognize it years ago and push it down. Men got frustrated and it was called passion. Women got frustrated and it was called emotional. "Yes, sir," she said and turned to leave. "Oh, Chen," Reeves called out. She turned back. "Good thinking on the terrain knowledge, very detail-oriented, very womanly." He smiled at his own joke. Nobody else was there to laugh, but he smiled anyway. Sarah walked back to her quarters, a small tent she shared with 2 other female officers. The base housed roughly 800 soldiers, and about 40 of them were women. The women stayed on their side of the base, not officially, just practically. She sat on her cot and opened her laptop. She pulled up the intelligence files on the cache location. Reeves was right about one thing: it was the kind of operation that could get noticed, the kind that could matter. But Thompson had never worked in that region before. He was good at following orders, but he didn't have instincts. He had procedures, and procedures didn't keep soldiers alive when things went wrong. When things went wrong, and Sarah had been in enough operations to know they always went wrong eventually, you needed people who could think. She studied the maps. She studied the satellite imagery. She looked at the reports from the last 3 patrols in the area. She marked the locations where ambushes were most likely, where escape routes would funnel targets, where the ground would be hardest. By midnight, she had mapped out how the operation should actually be run. Not how it was supposed to be run according to the playbook, but how it would keep the most people alive. She didn't sleep. The mission went hot at 4:47 a.m. Sarah heard the first explosion from her tent. The sound carried differently at dawn, sharper, more piercing. Her years of experience translated the sound into information automatically. That was an improvised explosive device. Too big for a standard roadside bomb. Coordinated. She was in the operations tent within 2 minutes, still pulling on her body armor. "We've got a situation," Lieutenant Marcus Webb said. He was young, only 26, but he had good sense. "Thompson's convoy took fire about 7 kilometers in. They're pinned down in what looks like an ambush. The militants were waiting." Sarah's stomach went cold. Waiting. That meant someone had told them the convoy was coming. That meant there was a leak somewhere. "Air support," she asked. "Being scrambled now. We've got an A-10 Warthog en route. ETA 8 minutes." 8 minutes was a long time when people were dying. Sarah looked at the map. She looked at the grid coordinates where Thompson's convoy was pinned. She looked at the terrain features around them, and she saw it immediately. She saw the problem. Thompson had taken the direct route, the obvious route, the route that anyone with military training would recognize as an ambush corridor. It was a valley with high ground on both sides. If you were smart, if you had actually studied the terrain like Sarah had done all night, you would have gone around. You would have approached from the north, where the ground rose gradually and you could maintain suppressive fire. But Thompson didn't know that. Thompson had never been there before. "I'm taking my squad in," Sarah said. "Negative," Lieutenant Webb said immediately. "Thompson's got backup en route. We need to let command handle this." "Command is pinned down," Sarah said. Her voice was level, controlled, the way she had learned to keep her emotions invisible. "We've got a 6-minute window before the A-10 gets there. Thompson's squad could be overrun in that time." The colonel gave clear orders that. Sarah was already moving. She was already out of the operations tent. She was already running to where her squad was billeted. Her second-in-command, Sergeant Marcus Hayes, was asleep when she arrived. He sat up immediately when she came through the tent flap. "We're rolling out," Sarah said. "Combat operation full gear." Hayes didn't ask questions. He woke the other 10 soldiers in the squad. They were all under Sarah's direct command, all of them trained by her, all of them trusted her judgment. It took them 5 minutes to get into gear and in the vehicles. They drove hard across the desert, the 2 Humvees bouncing over terrain that hadn't been made for roads. Sarah sat in the passenger seat of the first vehicle, her hands gripping the edge of the door frame. Her mind was running simulations. Her instincts were screaming at her about trajectories and angles and the way sound carried in canyons. The radio crackled. It was Lieutenant Webb. "Chen, return to base immediately. That is a direct order. Reeves is furious." Sarah didn't respond. She couldn't. She was past the point of following orders from men who didn't understand war. She was past the point of invisible. The first shot hit their Humvee about 2 kilometers from Thompson's position. The impact threw Sarah forward against the dash. Blood filled her mouth where she bit her tongue. "Incoming fire, 2 o'clock, the driver yelled. "Return fire and keep moving," Sarah commanded. The vehicle swerved left, trying to get out of the line of fire. But Sarah could see the muzzle flashes from the high ground. Multiple shooters, multiple positions. This wasn't a small ambush. This was a coordinated military attack. Her squad returned fire, rounds cracking out from the windows. The driver pushed the Humvee faster. The second vehicle behind them was holding its own, soldiers on the mounted guns laying down covering fire. The valley opened up ahead of them, and there, in the center of a canyon of twisted metal and dust, Sarah could see Thompson's convoy. 3 Humvees, all disabled, soldiers taking fire from at least 4 different positions. "All personnel dismount and advance," Sarah ordered. "Suppress the enemy positions. Go, go, go." Her squad jumped from the vehicles with the smooth efficiency of soldiers who had trained together 100 times. They moved forward in teams, each covering the other. Sarah was in the middle of them, her rifle trained on the ridgeline above Thompson's position. A militant appeared 40 meters to her left. Sarah saw him before he saw her. She fired twice. He went down. Another one appeared from behind a rock formation. Sergeant Hayes took him out. They were moving forward inch by inch when Sarah heard it. That distinctive jet engine roar that meant the A-10 was arriving. "All personnel, identify yourselves. Wave your arms if you're American," Sarah yelled into her radio. She looked up and saw it. The A-10 Warthog, a massive gray shape against the blue sky, its distinctive nose cone pointed down at the valley floor. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Sarah waved her rifle above her head. Around her, her squad did the same. They were moving across open ground now, trying to reach Thompson's position. The A-10 fired its GIU-8 cannon. The sound was like nothing else on Earth, like a buzzing so loud it became a scream, like 1,000 angry wasps concentrated into a line of death. The rounds came down at a rate of 3,000 per minute, a solid line of depleted uranium and lead and hellfire. The enemy position on the North Ridge simply ceased to exist. Rock formations were pulverized. Militants disappeared. The cannon fire moved methodically across the ridge, suppressing enemy fire position after position. Sarah and her squad kept moving forward. They reached Thompson's convoy in the chaos of the follow-up strike. Thompson was badly hurt, shrapnel in his leg, blood soaking through his pants. Sarah applied a tourniquet without asking permission. "Your platoon," she said. "Where?" Thompson pointed weakly to the second Humvee. Sarah's jaw tightened. Of the 12 soldiers who had left the base that morning, 9 were still alive, 3 were critical, 1 was already gone. They made another pass, this time firing on the eastern ridge where she detected new muzzle flashes. The sound and fury of it was almost numbing. "Load casualties," Sarah commanded. "We're moving back now. Hayes, cover position. The jet will give us suppression as we extract." Her squad worked with practiced speed. They loaded Thompson and the other wounded onto the vehicles. Sarah was the last to board, checking one more time that everyone was accounted for. As the Humvees turned to leave the valley, the A-10 made one final pass. But this time, Sarah watched it happen. She was looking directly at the ridge to her left, about 200 meters away, when the cannon fire painted it with fire. The rocks exploded. Dust rose like a red cloud. That was when she saw him. One of the militants, seemingly untouched by the barrage, was standing on a high point of the ridge. He was aiming something at the Humvees. Sarah's mind processed the shape instantly. Rocket launcher, shoulder fired. Time seemed to slow down. Sarah saw the missile leave the launcher. She saw it track toward their vehicle. She saw the smoke trail. "RPG!" she screamed. She threw herself out the door and pushed the driver hard to the left. The missile hit the Humvee behind them, Hayes' vehicle, in the back left quarter panel. The explosion was the last thing Sarah clearly remembered. When she woke up, she was in the medical tent. The pain was everywhere. Her left side felt like it was on fire. She couldn't see out of her right eye. There was bandaging there. Her left arm was immobilized. A medic leaned over her. "You're awake," he said. "Don't move. You've got severe burns, shrapnel wounds, and a possible fracture of 2 ribs. You're stable, but just barely." Sarah tried to speak, but her throat was dry. Her lips wouldn't work right. The medic gave her water through a straw. "The others," she croaked. "Your squad," the medic said. 3 KIA, 2 in surgery now, the rest are stable." Sarah closed her eye, 3 dead. She had lost 3 of her people. The weight of that settled on her chest like a stone. "Sergeant Hayes?" she asked, though she was afraid of the answer. "He's stable," the medic said. "Burns on his upper body and shrapnel wounds, but he made it." Sarah's eye filled with tears. She had failed her people. She had taken them into combat against direct orders, and 3 of them had died. But she had also saved Thompson's squad. She had also stopped the ambush from becoming a complete massacre. The medic left her to rest, but Sarah didn't sleep. She lay in the darkness and pain and thought about what happened next. She had disobeyed direct orders. She had acted without authorization. In the military, that was exactly the kind of thing that ended careers. In the morning, Colonel Reeves came to see her. He stood at the foot of her bed, his arms crossed. His expression was unreadable. "The thing about civilians," he said slowly, "is that they don't understand military structure. They don't understand chain of command. But you do, Chen. You understand it very well, which is what makes what you did today so hard to explain." Sarah didn't respond. "Thompson's report says you saved his life," Reeves continued. "Says you disobeyed orders and risked your entire squad and probably saved a dozen men in the process. He's also recommending you for a medal, for valor." Sarah felt something shift in her chest. A medal, recognition. "But here's the thing," Reeves said. He leaned closer. "We have procedures, we have chain of command, and if every officer who thought they knew better than their commander started running their own operations, this whole system would fall apart. You know that, don't you?" "Yes, sir," Sarah said quietly. "So I'm going to have to recommend that you be relieved of command," he said. "A court-martial is being considered. The details are still being worked out upstairs, but I wanted you to hear it from me first." He stood there waiting for her response. Sarah understood what he was doing. He was offering her a choice. She could fight it, could drag it through the system, could try to defend herself, or she could go quietly and maybe it would go easier on her. "Understood, sir," she said. Reeves nodded. "You're a good soldier, Chen, but you need to understand your place in this organization." After he left, Sarah lay in her medical bed and stared at the ceiling. Her place. She had always been trying to find her place. Always been trying to be invisible enough to be accepted, but strong enough to do the job. It had never worked. It was never going to work. 3 of her soldiers were dead because she had tried to save people outside her chain of command. And now, she was going to lose her career because she had been right to try. The medic came back in the afternoon with new bandages and pain medication. He told her that the base was calling her a hero, that soldiers were saying she was the reason Thompson's squad survived, that there was talk of the president potentially hearing about her actions. But none of it mattered. She was invisible again. Just this time, she was invisible and broken. The next morning, she woke to find a young pilot sitting in the chair beside her bed. He was in his early 30s, with sandy hair and the confident bearing of someone who lived his life above the clouds. "Captain Chen," he said, "I'm Major David Yates. I was flying the A-10 yesterday." Sarah tried to sit up, but the pain stopped her. She settled back onto the pillows. "I saw what you did," Yates said. "Webb told me what happened, about how you went against orders to save lives, about how you made the right call even though nobody was expecting you to." "I disobeyed direct orders," Sarah said flatly. "Yes," Yates agreed. "And you saved my squadron from having to explain why 11 more Americans didn't come home. I heard about Thompson. I heard about your soldiers, and I know you're facing court-martial." Sarah didn't say anything. "I also know," Yates continued, "that I painted that sky with fire exactly where it needed to be because you were on the ground directing me to the actual tactical situation instead of where the original plan said it should be. Every militant I took out yesterday was where you said they'd be. That's not luck. That's not procedure. That's tactical genius." He stood up to leave. "For what it's worth," he said, "in my experience, the people who rise highest in this military are the ones who know when to follow rules and when to break them. You broke them at exactly the right moment. That takes more strength than following them ever would." After he left, Sarah lay in the darkness and realized something. She was no longer invisible. What she was now was something else entirely, something more dangerous. The court-martial proceedings began 14 days after the ambush. Sarah was still recovering, still moving slowly, still wearing bandages under her uniform. But the military didn't believe in waiting. The hearing room was cold and formal, all dark wood and official seals. 3 officers sat behind a table, a colonel, a major, and a captain. Colonel Reeves sat off to the side, his role now that of plaintiff rather than her commanding officer. The prosecutor was a career JAG officer named Captain Linda Morris, a woman in her late 40s who had built a reputation for being ruthless. She presented the evidence methodically, orders from Reeves, radio logs showing Sarah's refusal to comply, records of the casualties. Then she presented the counter-narrative. Sarah had gone rogue. Sarah had endangered her own soldiers. Sarah had acted outside the chain of command in a way that could have created additional casualties instead of preventing them. It was technically true, and it was completely misleading. When Sarah's defense attorney, a soft-spoken man named Captain Robert Jenkins, got his chance, he presented the evidence that Thompson's convoy had been ambushed because someone had leaked the mission details. He showed the court the intelligence Sarah had compiled overnight. He showed them the exact terrain features that had made the ambush location so deadly. "Captain Chen," he said, recognized that the operation as planned was compromised. She recognized that following procedures would likely result in additional casualties, and she made a decision to act in the best interests of American soldiers. "At the expense of following orders," Morris countered. "She saved lives," Jenkins said. "That's what soldiers are supposed to do." "She disobeyed the chain of command," Morris said. "That's what soldiers are forbidden to do." The arguments went back and forth like a tennis match. Sarah sat at the table with Jenkins and said nothing. She had been advised to say nothing, let the evidence speak. During a break, Lieutenant Webb found her in the hallway. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly. He looked around to make sure nobody was listening. "The intelligence leak. I found out who it was." Sarah's attention sharpened immediately. "Who?" "Major Thompson," Webb said. "He had a girlfriend in the communications tent. She's the one who told him the mission details. I found text messages on her phone. She was asking for information in exchange for money." Thompson's family is in debt, serious debt, so he sold the information. Sarah felt the world tilt. Thompson had caused the ambush that killed 3 of her soldiers by selling mission details to enemy combatants. And now Thompson was lying about Sarah, claiming she had acted without authorization, when in fact she had saved his life despite his own incompetence. "We need to tell the court," Sarah said. Webb shook his head. "It's complicated. There's an investigation into whether Thompson actually sold anything to the enemy or if the girlfriend was acting independently. The JAG office doesn't want to muddy the waters with Thompson's criminal investigation while the court-martial is ongoing. They said we should focus on the order's issue separately." "So nothing happens?" Sarah asked. "He lives, he gets promoted, I get destroyed." "I know how it looks," Webb said. "I'm sorry, but my hands are tied." The trial continued for 3 more days. By the end, Sarah could see which way it was going. The judges had decided. A military officer could not disobey orders, even for good reasons. To allow that would be to tear down the entire structure of command. On the 4th day, they reached a verdict. "Captain Sarah Chen," the presiding colonel said, "this court finds you guilty of disobeying direct orders from a superior officer. You are hereby sentenced to a dishonorable discharge from the United States Army, effective immediately. You are also ordered to pay restitution for the damages to Army property in the amount of $75,000. The words fell like stones. Dishonorable discharge meant Sarah would lose her pension. It meant she would lose her rank. It meant she would have a military record that branded her as someone who couldn't be trusted. She stood up, saluted the court, and walked out without showing any emotion on her face. But inside, something had broken. Sergeant Hayes was waiting for her in the corridor. He was still moving slowly from his burns, but his eyes were clear and angry. "That's bullshit, ma'am," he said. "That's complete bullshit." "It's the system," Sarah said. "It's how these things work." "It's injustice," Hayes said. "And everyone knows it. Half the base is talking about this. Everyone knows Thompson leaked that mission. Everyone knows you saved lives, and they're destroying you for it." Sarah put a hand on his shoulder. "You need to move on, Sergeant. You need to forget about this and focus on your career. That's an order." Hayes's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Sarah was given 72 hours to leave the base. She packed her belongings, which weren't many, into 2 duffel bags and 2 boxes. 12 years of military service reduced to the contents of a car. Major Yates found her loading her things into her truck. "I heard about the verdict," he said. "I'm sorry." "It is what it is," Sarah said. She was tired of talking about it, tired of the injustice of it. "No, it's not," Yates said. "It's wrong, and I'm going to tell you something off the record. The pilots in my squadron have access to certain classified information. We know Thompson sold mission details to enemy combatants. We know he got paid for them. We know that the 3 soldiers who died yesterday would still be alive if the mission had been run with basic security procedures." Sarah stopped what she was doing. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm angry," Yates said. "Because it's wrong, and because I'm going to make sure it doesn't stay hidden forever. But I wanted to warn you first. There's going to be a higher investigation into Thompson. It's going to take time, but it's coming." "I'll be gone by then," Sarah said. "I'll have moved on." "Maybe," Yates said. "But I think you'll stay close to this. I think you'll want to see it through. And when it comes time for people to testify about what really happened that day, I think you're going to want to be the one who tells the truth." Sarah drove east for 2 days, across Wyoming and into the small town of Whitmore, South Dakota. Population, 3,200, the kind of place where nobody knew who you were, which was exactly what she wanted. She rented a small apartment above a hardware store. She got a job at a tire factory on the edge of town. She kept her head down and tried to disappear. But she couldn't unsee what she had seen. She couldn't unfeel what she had felt. The weight of the 3 soldiers who died under her command, or rather, the 3 soldiers who died because she hadn't been allowed to command them in the first place. At night, she would lie awake and think about what Yates had said, about an investigation, about Thompson facing charges. During the day, she read everything she could find online about court-martials and criminal cases and military justice. She learned that appeals took years, that investigations went nowhere, that in the military, just like in civilian life, the people with power usually stayed in power. She tried to let it go. She tried to move on. It lasted 6 months before her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer. "Captain Chen," a male voice said. "This is Colonel Harold Mitchell. I'm with the Army Criminal Investigation Division. I'm calling about the investigation into Major David Thompson." Sarah's heart began to beat faster. "Yes." "We'd like to have a conversation," Mitchell said. "There are some things we need to talk to you about." Colonel Mitchell turned out to be a compact man in his late 50s, with salt and pepper hair and the kind of tired eyes that came from decades of military service. He arrived at the tire factory in Whitmore on a Tuesday afternoon in a rental car, looking completely out of place in a small South Dakota town. They met at a coffee shop on Main Street, in a booth in the back where nobody could see them. "I appreciate you meeting with me," Mitchell said. He had a straightforward way of speaking, no wasted words. "I know your discharge was discharged. I know you probably want nothing to do with military matters anymore." "Tell me what you want," Sarah said. "The investigation into Major Thompson has expanded," Mitchell said. "We have evidence, solid evidence, that he sold classified information regarding military operations to foreign agents. We have financial records showing he was paid $150,000 over a 6-month period. We have testimony from his girlfriend that he actively provided operational details in exchange for that money." Sarah felt something twist in her stomach. 150,000. That was enough to make someone rich in a place like Whitmore, South Dakota. That was enough to change a life. That was enough to kill for. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because we're building a case," Mitchell said. "And we need your testimony. We need you to tell the court, the actual criminal court, not a military one, exactly what you saw that day. We need you to explain why you believed the operation was compromised. We need you to show that you acted on solid tactical reasoning, not insubordination." "The court-martial already decided," Sarah said. "I was guilty." "The court-martial followed military law," Mitchell said. "But this is different. This is criminal law. This is about espionage and treason. This is about whether an American military officer sold military secrets to enemies of the United States. That's going to carry prison time." Sarah looked at the coffee in front of her. It was getting cold. Everything always got cold eventually. "I left that life," she said. "Did you?" Mitchell asked. "Then why are you still alive? Why haven't you moved on? Why, when I looked at your financial records, did I find that you've been using your limited resources to pay legal fees? Why have you been in contact with Major Yates 3 times in the past 4 months?" Sarah didn't answer. "You haven't moved on," Mitchell said. "You've been waiting, you've been angry, and you've been waiting. And now we're giving you the chance to do something about that anger." "I can't prove anything," Sarah said. "I was disobeying orders. That's going to be the defense. They're going to say my testimony is tainted because I'm angry about my own discharge." "Maybe," Mitchell said. "Or maybe the truth is enough. You see, the thing about this case is that we have 3 soldiers dead because of Thompson's actions. We have a unit compromised because of Thompson's actions. We have you discharged with a dishonorable record because Thompson was incompetent and wanted to hide it. The truth, actually spoken out loud by someone who was there, might be enough to matter." He slid a folder across the table. Inside were photographs of the valley, photographs of the ambush site, photographs of intelligence reports, photographs of bank records, and photographs of Thompson being led away in handcuffs. "He's already been arrested," Mitchell said. "He's already talking to lawyers. His defense is going to be that he didn't understand the seriousness of what he was doing, that he made a mistake, that he didn't actually give any useful information." "Did he?" Sarah asked. "Yes," Mitchell said. "The details he provided were complete enough that hostile forces set up an ambush at exactly the right location and exactly the right time. If they hadn't known your unit was coming in to support his operation, they wouldn't have been waiting." Sarah closed her eyes. There it was, the truth she had known but never had confirmed. 3 soldiers had died because Thompson had sold the information, and she had been blamed for disobeying orders to try to save them. "I need to think about it," she said. "You have 48 hours, Mitchell said. "After that, we're moving forward with or without you, but with you, we have a much better case." That night, Sarah sat in her apartment and watched the sun set over the Great Plains. She thought about the 3 soldiers who were dead. She thought about their families. She thought about the wives and mothers who had been told their loved ones had been killed in combat, when really they had been killed because an officer had sold secrets. She thought about Sergeant Hayes. He was still in the Army, still serving, still having to look Thompson in the face at briefings before Thompson was arrested. That had to have been its own kind of hell. She called Yates. "I know why you called Mitchell," Yates said before Sarah could even speak. "Mitchell called me for a statement. I gave him everything I had, flight records, radio communications, everything." "Why?" Sarah asked. "You're still active duty, you're risking your career." "Am I?" Yates said. "Or am I protecting my career? If Thompson doesn't face real consequences for this, then the message gets sent that selling military secrets is acceptable as long as you're high-ranking enough. That affects every pilot, every soldier, everyone. I'm not risking my career by testifying. I'm protecting it." After she hung up, Sarah made her decision. She called Mitchell back. "I'll do it," she said. The trial began 3 months later in federal court in Denver, Colorado. It was a completely different thing from the military court-martial. It was public. It was detailed. It was televised. Sarah sat in the witness stand, and she told the truth. She talked about the intelligence briefing. She talked about what she noticed, the obvious nature of the route Thompson planned to take. She talked about the ambush corridor she saw in the terrain. She talked about the all-night analysis she did to prove that the mission was compromised. "I believe someone had sold information about the operation," she said. "I believed it so strongly that I felt justified in disobeying orders to try to prevent a massacre." Thompson's defense attorney, a slick man from an expensive firm, tried to break her down. "Isn't it true that you were angry at Major Thompson?" he demanded. "Isn't it true that you felt passed over for promotion? Isn't it true that you saw this as an opportunity to show off your superior tactical knowledge?" "It's true that I was angry," Sarah said calmly. "It's true that I felt passed over, and it's true that my tactical analysis was correct. All three of those things can be true at the same time." "But your anger is clouding your judgment about the evidence," the lawyer said. "No," Sarah said. "My anger is making me remember exactly what happened. I have a very clear memory of that day because 3 men died. My anger keeps that memory sharp." The prosecutor presented the financial evidence. Thompson's sudden wealth, the deposits into his account from offshore sources, the communication between Thompson and the girlfriend who had acted as his contact with hostile forces. Thompson took the stand in his own defense. He looked smaller than Sarah remembered, diminished. He admitted to taking the money, but he claimed he didn't understand what he was doing. "I was in debt," he said. "A woman approached me. She said she was a journalist who needed background information about military operations for an article she was writing. I didn't think about it. I just needed the money. I didn't think anyone would actually get hurt." "Did nobody tell you that military operations involve combat?" the prosecutor asked. Thompson didn't answer. "Did nobody tell you that operations in Afghanistan involve hostile fire and casualties?" I guess I didn't think it through," Thompson said. Sarah watched him from the gallery and felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, certainly, but also something else. Pity, contempt. This man had destroyed his career, his reputation, and 3 soldiers' lives because he was careless, because he didn't think. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts: espionage, treason, conspiracy to transmit classified information to hostile forces. Thompson would spend the next 45 years in a federal prison. After the verdict was announced, Sarah stood outside the courthouse and gave a statement to the press. She had prepared it carefully. "3 soldiers gave their lives," she said, reading from a prepared text. "They died because of a breach in security that could have been prevented. Their families deserve to know that the person responsible is now facing justice. I hope this case serves as a reminder that nobody in our military is above accountability." A reporter shouted a question. "Captain Chen, what do you want people to know about your discharge?" Sarah looked directly into the camera. She had thought about how to answer this question for months. "I want people to know that speaking up, even when it costs you everything, is worth doing," she said. "I want people to know that 3 soldiers are coming home, and that's what matters. And I want people to know that the system, while it's broken in some ways, sometimes finds its way to justice." Sarah returned to Whitmore thinking that would be the end of it. The trial was over. Thompson was convicted. Justice had been served even if her discharge remained permanent. She was wrong. 2 weeks after the verdict, her phone rang. It was Captain Robert Jenkins, her defense attorney from the court-martial. "I need you to listen to something," he said. He sounded excited. "I've been following the Thompson trial very carefully, and I've been rereading the transcripts from your court-martial, and I think we might have grounds to appeal your discharge." Sarah's heart began to beat faster. "What do you mean?" "I mean that the evidence of Thompson's guilt changes the entire context of your actions," Jenkins said. "You didn't disobey orders on a whim. You disobeyed orders based on solid tactical intelligence that was proven correct. Moreover, if the court had known about Thompson's espionage, they would have had to view your actions in a completely different light." "Can you appeal a discharge?" Sarah asked. She had given up believing in the possibility of redemption a long time ago. "It's rare," Jenkins said, "but it's not impossible, especially in cases where there's been a miscarriage of justice. And Chen, what happened to you was a miscarriage of justice. You did the right thing and the system punished you for it." "I can't afford legal fees," Sarah said immediately. "I'm not going to charge you," Jenkins said. "I'm going to do this pro bono because you're right and the system was wrong and somebody needs to fix that." The appeal process was slow. Months passed. Sarah went back to work at the tire factory, back to her apartment, back to her quiet life. But now she was waiting for something instead of running from something. Colonel Mitchell called her several times to ask follow-up questions. He was building a case to show that Thompson's guilt was evidence that Sarah's concerns about a compromised operation were justified. "The court-martial assumed you were acting on suspicion," Mitchell said. "But we can show that your suspicion was based on real evidence. We can show that your disobedience prevented a worse tragedy." In the spring, the appeal was granted. A federal judge agreed to review the case. The hearing took place in a smaller courtroom than the Thompson trial. Just Sarah, Jenkins, 2 prosecutors, and the judge. But it mattered. It mattered a lot. Jenkins presented his argument methodically. He showed the court the evidence that Thompson's operation had been compromised. He showed the military intelligence Sarah had compiled. He showed how her tactical analysis had been completely correct. "Your Honor," he said, "Captain Chen did not disobey orders on a whim. She disobeyed orders because she had identified a real threat to American lives. The subsequent investigation has proven that she was correct. She should not be punished for being right." The prosecutor argued back. "The question is not whether she was right," he said. "The question is whether she was justified in disobeying the chain of command, and the answer under military law is no." "But military law exists to protect American lives and maintain military effectiveness," Jenkins countered. "When an order would result in American deaths, and a military officer prevents that outcome by acting outside the chain of command, that officer is fulfilling the purpose of military law, not violating it." The judge listened to both sides carefully. Then he gave his ruling. "This court finds that the conviction of Captain Chen stands," he said. "However, this court also finds that the original court-martial was conducted without complete information regarding the nature of the threat that prompted Captain Chen's actions. This court, having reviewed the complete evidence, finds that while Captain Chen violated the Uniform Code of Military Justice, her actions were taken in the reasonable belief that American lives were in immediate danger, and that she acted appropriately under those circumstances." Sarah felt her hopes start to sink. He was upholding the conviction. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "this court is recommending that the original sentence be reviewed. Specifically, this court recommends that the dishonorable discharge be changed to an honorable discharge, and that the financial restitution requirement be waived. While the violation of orders cannot be forgiven, the circumstances under which that violation occurred warrant a reconsideration of the severity of the punishment." Sarah felt Jenkins grip her hand. It wasn't a full exoneration, but it was something. It was recognition that she had done the right thing under impossible circumstances. The recommendation went through the Army's review process. It took another 2 months, but in the summer of that year, Sarah received official notice. Her discharge was changed from dishonorable to honorable. Her pension, which had been stripped away, was being reinstated. The financial penalties were waived. She was no longer marked as disgraced. Sarah sat in her apartment, and cried for the first time since that morning in the medical tent, when she found out about the 3 soldiers who had died. Sergeant Hayes called her that afternoon. "I heard," he said. "I heard about your discharge being changed. I wanted to be the first to congratulate you." "Thank you," Sarah said. "Are you coming back?" Hayes asked. "There's going to be some restructuring in command. Thompson's gone, obviously. Reeves is being investigated for his role in mishandling the original operation. There's a lot of opportunity right now." Sarah thought about it. She thought about what it would be like to go back, to put on the uniform again, to stand in front of soldiers and command them not as an invisible woman, but as someone whose judgment had been proven correct. "I need to think about it," she said. In the end, Sarah didn't go back to active duty, but she did take a job as a consultant for the Army's judicial review process, helping to restructure how the military handled officer misconduct and security breaches. The work was satisfying in a way that field operations had never been. She got to see the system change, get to influence how future officers were trained and evaluated. But there was one loose end that still bothered her. Colonel Reeves had been investigated for his role in allowing the compromised operation to go forward, but he hadn't been court-martialed. He had retired with full honors. He was living in Virginia with his pension and his reputation mostly intact. It wasn't justice. It was the kind of thing that happened to senior officers who had political connections. Sarah might have let it go. She might have moved on and forgotten about it. But then she got a call from Major Yates. "I'm now commanding the A-10 squadron," he said, "and I've been assigned to do a comprehensive review of all operations from that deployment. I've been looking at the decision-making processes, and I need to talk to you about something." They met in a coffee shop near Fort Carson, Colorado, near where Yates was stationed. "After Thompson was convicted, I decided to dig deeper into the intelligence briefing," Yates said. "I wanted to understand how such a compromised operation made it to the planning stage, and I found something interesting." He pulled out a folder. Inside were intelligence reports, decision-making memos, and radio logs. "Reeves didn't just ignore your concerns," Yates said. "He actively worked to block them. There's a memo here where you recommended a security review before the operation went forward. Reeves rejected it. There's a radio log where Webb warned Reeves that something seemed off about the intelligence. Reeves told him to stand down." Sarah felt her jaw tighten. He knew something was wrong. "I think he knew," Yates said. "I don't think he knew exactly what was wrong, but he knew something didn't add up. And he went forward anyway because he was focused on the quick win, the promotion, the recognition." "What are you going to do with this?" Sarah asked. "That depends on what you want to do," Yates said. "I could file a formal complaint, I could take this to CID, or we could let it go." Sarah thought about the 3 soldiers. She thought about Thompson sitting in prison. She thought about her own discharge and the long journey to get it reversed. "I want him to answer for it," she said. The investigation took 6 months, but the evidence was solid. Reeves had received intelligence assessments suggesting the operation was compromised. He had received warnings from his own staff that something was wrong, and he had decided to proceed anyway because he wanted the credit for a successful operation. When the investigators came to him, Reeves admitted to most of it, but he claimed he didn't know the operation was actually compromised. He said he had been optimistic about the mission. He said he had believed in Thompson. "I trusted an officer under my command," he said in his deposition. "Was that a mistake? Perhaps, but it's not a crime to be wrong." But it was a crime, or at least a serious violation of military law, to ignore warnings about a potentially compromised operation, and to allow that operation to proceed without adequate precautions. Reeves faced his own court-martial. Unlike Thompson, who had active espionage charges, Reeves was charged with dereliction of duty and improper command decisions. Sarah testified against him. She sat in the witness stand and calmly explained what had happened, how she had raised concerns, how he had dismissed them, how 3 soldiers had died as a result of his decisions. "I'm not saying Colonel Reeves wanted those soldiers to die," Sarah said. "I'm saying he wanted a successful operation more than he wanted to be careful, and he let that desire override his good judgment." Reeves' defense was that he had been following proper procedures, that Sarah had been acting out of turn, that the operation had been sound from a command perspective. Captain Chen was a junior officer at the time, Reeves' attorney said. She had no authority to question my decisions. She had no right to the intelligence I had available. She was making assumptions based on incomplete information. The information she had was complete enough to prevent a disaster, Sarah responded. The information you had was complete enough to require precautions that you didn't take. The court-martial lasted 3 weeks. The verdict came back guilty on 2 counts: improper command decisions and dereliction of duty. Reeves was sentenced to dishonorable discharge from the military, loss of pension, and 2 years in a military prison. The day after the verdict, Sarah received a phone call from the Secretary of the Army. "Captain Chen," he said, "I wanted to speak with you directly. Your actions and your testimony have helped us clean up significant issues in our command structure. I wanted to personally thank you and apologize for what happened to you." "Thank you, sir," Sarah said. "I'm also calling to offer you a position," he continued. "We're establishing a new oversight committee to review high-level command decisions. We'd like you to lead it. The rank would be colonel, and it would come with a substantial salary increase." Sarah felt her breath catch. Colonel, the rank she had been denied, the recognition she had been overlooked for. But something inside her had changed. The anger that had driven her for so long was finally beginning to fade. She didn't need the promotion anymore. She didn't need the recognition. "Sir, I appreciate the offer," she said, "but I need to think about it." Sarah did think about it. For weeks she thought about it. She imagined going back to the military. She imagined standing in briefing rooms with a colonel's insignia. She imagined commanding respect instead of having to earn it through sheer competence. But she also imagined the weight of it, the politics, the endless compromises, the knowledge that even now, even with everything that had happened, there would be officers who couldn't accept a woman in command. Instead of accepting the position, Sarah made a different choice. She opened a small consulting firm in Denver that worked with military organizations, helping them identify and prevent the kind of miscarriage of justice that had nearly destroyed her. It was meaningful work. It was work that mattered. And a year into her new career, she got an unexpected visit. Sergeant Marcus Hayes showed up at her office with a bottle of expensive whiskey and a grin on his face. "I heard you turned down the colonel position," he said, settling into a chair across from her desk. "Everyone at the base was talking about it." "It wasn't the right fit," Sarah said. "No," Hayes said, "it was the perfect fit, but you're a better person than you are a politician. You always were." They talked for hours. Hayes had made sergeant major. He was training the next generation of soldiers. He was trying to pass along everything he had learned from Sarah about doing things the right way instead of the easy way. "The thing I wanted to tell you," Hayes said as he was leaving, "is that all 3 of those soldiers who died, their families now know the truth about what happened. They know it wasn't meaningless. They know that you fought for justice on their behalf. I think that matters to them." After he left, Sarah sat at her desk and looked out at the Denver skyline. The afternoon sun was hitting the tall buildings, making them glow gold. She thought about a painted sky. She thought about the A-10 drawing lines of fire across a ridgeline. She thought about Major Yates making split-second decisions above the clouds to protect soldiers he had never met on the ground. Sometimes justice came from above. Sometimes it came from the people who were brave enough to act when nobody expected them to. Sometimes it came from speaking the truth over and over again until someone finally listened.